Good evening, good evening, good evening. What's going on, brothers and sisters? I'm your brother Tesjuan, first and founder member of Out of All Your Boxes. Out of All Your Boxes is a vanguard organization that's preemptive and strategic. Out of All Your Boxes operates from a sound thinking that's executed with efficient action and pursuit of practical and sustainable options and solutions. Out of All Your Boxes is rooted in the importance of time, health, family, and community. Out of All Your Boxes is not motivated racially, politically, religiously, or for popularity. You can check us out at www.ooayb.org. Again, that's www.ooayb.org for all your questions and your interests. Please actively share, thoughtfully comment, and subscribe to this channel. Your interest and support is greatly appreciated. So today's topic is one that I am fresh out of the oven on. I've been doing some research. Um, I don't even really know how long. It's kind of been a come and go topic for me. Marriage and all the different types of marriages and relationships and just a whole lot of different things. I've been in and out of different things. But for this topic, one of my key resources for the topic that I'm going to cover today is the Bible, is the Holy Bible. Now, as I've already stated, Out of All Your Boxes is not a religious organization, but because religion and Christianity and all the other religions, they impact so many people's lives. I'm definitely going to be teaching things that I study and I learn from those scriptures. And by no shape or form am I professing to be a member or participant. And in this religion that I'm going to be talking about tonight, or in scripture, I should say, or any other that I may refer to as resource in the future. So the topic of this video is why marriage fell or why marriages fell. And it's something, like I said, I'm fresh out the oven on. It was sparked today by a conversation with me and my fiance. Um, just talking about this and other things in reference to relationships and, what's healthy and what's not, so on and so forth. And so it prompted me to go and into my study as I always do, and kind of just sit down and allow myself to be used and to hear what the Most High is saying to me. So let's get right into it. I'm going to start right with scripture, and mostly everything that I'm going to say is going to be reference to scripture that I found in the Bible. Now, I use a lot of different versions of the Bible. Like the physical Bible I have is a Bible that's written for men of color, and it's a King James Bible, physical Bible. But I also have a Bible along with other holy documents and holy books on my phone, to include the Holy Bible, to include the Quran, to include the Tanakh, to include the teachings of Confucius, so on and so forth. So I can go on and on about the different books that I have on my phone that I refer to and I study from. But again, this subject matter I pulled specifically from the Holy Bible. And let me be even more specific in saying that I only pull from the Old Testament. So if you respond to this video coming out of the New Testament or coming out of some other types of scripture, I'm not going to probably respond to you because I'm not dealing with that subject matter at this point in this video. So again, let's get into it. The topic tonight is why marriage fell or why marriages fell. And the first scripture that I pull, and it's a definition or it alludes to a definition. It's Exodus 20, chapter 20 and verse 14. So Exodus chapter 20 and verse 14. This scripture is from the group of scriptures that are considered to be the Ten Commandments. Again, that are considered to be the Ten Commandments. Now, I'm going to do a later video, and I'm not really going to touch on the Ten Commandments or the actual commandments tonight. But personally, I don't see the scriptures that's in Exodus 20 as the Ten Commandments. And in a later video, I'll explain what they are. But for now, that's what we're going to say is pulled from the scripture that's considered the Ten Commandments. Again, it's Exodus 20, verse 14. Thou shalt not commit adultery is the verse. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Adultery, by and large, if you go through the scripture, especially in the early parts of scripture, adultery is really not defined. It's only implied in stories and allegory, from tongue to ear, as they would say. It's only implied. But in my research and things I know kind of from reading other parts of the Bible, I can kind of define what adultery is. So let me define that for you. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Adultery is committed when a man has sex with another man's wife, or when a married female has sex with a male or a man that is other than her husband. So again, let me say that again. Adultery is committed when a man or a male has sex with another man or male's wife, or when a married female or woman has sex with another man or another male outside of her husband. That is what adultery is. All right. So let that be the first, pillar to this conversation that we're having tonight on the terms that are going to be used. All right, so that is what adultery is. When a man has sex with another man's wife, or when a married female has sex with someone other than her husband. That's what adultery is. Next, so we define adultery. Now, I, in my personal opinion, adultery is what it says it is. It's dealing with marriage. So because we're dealing with the marriage in adultery, which in some places is actually a crime that's punishable by death, and even in the scripture, which you'll see in a few minutes when I get to that part, it is punishable by death. Adultery deals specifically with the I don't want to say institution. I guess with the contract of marriage. I think the word contract is better. Or the concept. That's an even better word. The concept of what marriage is. So adultery is specific to the concept of marriage. So because of that, we have to define marriage. Now, again, just like with adultery, the word marriage is not directly defined in the early scripture, right? And I really don't think it's defined anywhere in scripture, just like adultery really isn't. So let's talk about what marriage is in the basic, simplest form. This is found in Genesis 2. So again, it comes before Exodus. Genesis 2, chapter 2, verse 24 and 25. Define marriage. All right. It defines the process or the concept of marriage. All right. It defines the process or concept of marriage and the removal of virginity, rather given or taken through sex, which creates the marriage. All right. So again, marriage is defined as the process of the removal of virginity, rather given, she gives it to me, or I take it in an act of rape or molestation or whatever the case may be. Through sex, create the concept or the construct of marriage. All right, so let's break it down because there's two verses here. Verse 24 is the actual act of sex. All right, the act of sex, the verse 24, Genesis 24, when it says that man and woman, let me pull it up real quick, they become one flesh. No, that's verse 25. Hold on. Genesis verse 2. I have this highlighted. So verse 24, that's why a man will leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they become one. And this is the New International Reader's Version that I'm reading out of here. So what I found to be the most accurate, and when I was, when you research it, what is the most accurate translation and interpretation of the scriptures is the New King James Version. And it says, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. All right. In verse 25 it says, and they were both naked, and the man and his wife were not ashamed. All right. So let's go back to the Reader's Version. Let's see what verse 20. And the man and his wife were both naked, and they did not feel any shame. So similar in terms of translation and interpretation. So again, verse 24 is the act where it says they were joined and became one flesh. And then when you see the word wife, it identifies that the marriage has been consummated and she now belongs to him. All right. So that's that part. Now, one of the key points that I need to touch on here is this right here. Eve was a virgin. Right? If you go into the reading of the scripture, chapter 1 and verse 26, I want to say, when it starts to deal with man and Adam and Eve, from chapter 1, verse 26, all the way to the current scripture verse, chapter 2, verse 24 and 25. All right. Eve was a virgin. So when a female virginity is removed, the male that her virginity is removed by, whether given nor taken, is her husband. All right. So let me say that again. And I know I'm about to, probably piss a whole bunch of people off, but I'm just reading it as it is in the scripture. Eve was a virgin, so when a female's virginity is removed, rather given or taken, that female has her virginity taken by her husband, or the man that takes her virginity is her husband. And you see that in Genesis 2, verse 24 and 25. All right. So I'm not going to say any more about that. I think that's pretty self-explanatory if you have an ear to hear and a mind to listen. So the next verse I was directed to is Leviticus. Is in Leviticus, and it's verse or chapter and verse Leviticus 18 and verse 20. Again, that's Leviticus chapter 18 and verse 20, and it states, "A man shall not have sex with his neighbor's wife." All right. So we've already defined what marriage is. We've already defined what adultery is. And we know that the marriage is consummated through the act of sex. So this verse points to what somebody outside of a marriage shall not do, and that he shall not have sex with his neighbor's wife. Now, do not get caught up on the word neighbor. All right. I can already imagine the comments or people replying to this. Do not get caught up on the word neighbor. It simply is understood that this is somebody else's wife. All right. In simple terms. And so the scripture, let me read the scripture in its entirety, is Leviticus 18 and verse 20 states that a man shall not have sex with his neighbor's wife, that will make him unclean. All right, so that's the entire scripture. So the uncleanliness comes in the adultery, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. But the uncleanliness comes in the adultery. All right. So by having sex with your neighbor's wife or with somebody else's wife, you become unclean. All right. And you can go into Leviticus and read in context what it is to be unclean. I'm not going to go into that here. So the next verse I was directed to is Leviticus chapter 20 and verse 10. And in this scripture, along with another that I'm gonna just kind of paraphrase in a minute, is Leviticus 20, chapter 20 and verse 10 states, a man who commits adultery with his neighbor's wife is given death, or that's the penalty. The penalty for it is death. A man who, the scripture states that the penalty for a man who commits adultery with his neighbor's wife is death. All right. So first you get what it is or what not to do, and then you get, if you do it, what the penalty is. All right. So those two scriptures I need you to keep close to your mind because it goes to the next portion of this. Now, the second scripture that I want to just kind of paraphrase, only thing it really does is it echoes Leviticus 20 and 10 is Deuteronomy 22 and verse 22. So that's Deuteronomy chapter 22 and verse 22. It echoes what Leviticus says here in verse 10. All right, 20 and 10. All right, so I want to make a point here. All right, and it's kind of going to be kind of redundant because I say the same thing here and then I say it again kind of later. So, so any female or any woman that had her virginity removed by a male and then has sex with another or other males commits adultery along with the male or males she had sex with. All right. Be clear about this. All right. This is not only just her, this is him or them as well, the men as well. All right. Now, in this conversation, don't get it twisted. This ain't a judgment conversation because the reason I'm doing this video is because it impacted me so much personally because I saw myself in this situation and in this conversation so much. You know, and I ain't gonna put all my business out there in the street, but you know, I can't readily say that anybody I've ever been with, you know, I necessarily took their virginity. So in that regard, I'm technically sleeping with somebody's wife. You know, somebody that belongs or somebody who gave their virginity to somebody else before I was present in their life. You know, and this applies. If you don't live in a glass house, I would suggest you not throw a stone here because this applies to many, 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 many people. All right, so be clear about that. All right. So, but again, any female that had her virginity removed by a male and then has sex with another or other males commits adultery along with the male or males she had sex with. And this applies to both the male and the female. All right. And they're both considered adulterous. And I guess the reason why this point is so poignant and so impactful is because most people are in marriages, right? And they're wondering why their marriages are in turmoil and, you know, why things are not the way God designed a marriage to be. And it's because, you know, you might be in a marriage with a person that, you know, obviously lost their virginity to someone else, specifically the woman I'm talking about here, lost her virginity to a man or a male, rather in her youth or, you know, when she was grown or whatever. And, you know, it might have been the only person, but it might have been, you know, it might have been 50 people between the person she lost her virginity to and now you, and you're her husband. And, you know, you wondering why you can't find any peace in that home or you can't find find the connection between you and that woman. And it's because, you know, she's somebody else's wife. by definition, by what Genesis 2 and 24 and 25 says. She's somebody else's wife because somebody else has her virginity. Her virginity was uncovered. And that's why, like, to kind of get off subject, like when you start reading about cleanliness, why it says in the scripture that a man is not to sleep with a woman when she's impure or when she's on her menstrual. It's because she's uncovered, right? And that part, it opens up a part of a woman that only the woman and God has access to, right? And it's through that, that God, I guess, identified a covenant with the woman. And if you go into the Adam and Eve story and you look at the original disobedience, you'll see why the discipline in which Eve was given in the disobedience, why she was given what she was given. And again, that's another video, that's another topic. So, but to bring it back, this is a very important point, not only to my personal situation, but to many, many people out there that might be listening and watching situation. And this is why you're having the issue you're having, is because you might be married, but you technically are in an adulterous relationship. So now the next scripture that I'm going to refer to is in Deuteronomy. Another scripture I spoke to a while ago was Deuteronomy 22 and 20, chapter 22 and verse 22. This here scripture is Deuteronomy chapter 24 and verse 1 through 4. And again, I'm paraphrasing, and you can go read the scripture for yourself and see the details of this. But this scripture and these 4 scriptures here explains the grounds in which a man can execute a divorce. Now, notice what I just said. It explains the grounds in which a man can execute a divorce. Now, you read between the lines however you want. And I'm not going to back away from it. It's clear to me what the scripture says about this. It explains the grounds a man can execute a divorce. But even in this divorce, the woman is unclean because her first husband divorced her. All right. Now, let's go back again. The first husband is not the man that she got up on the altar and in front of people, in front of a church, and went through a ceremony, and in some cases jumped a broom and went through all of this process and the white dress and all of this. That's not her husband. If that is not the man that has her virginity, the husband is the man that has her virginity. Be very, very clear about this. The man that has her virginity is her husband. He has right and entitlement to that woman in the eyes of God. If you take what Genesis 2 verse 24 and 25 says, that was the consummated relationship. That was the consummated marriage. Is when they became one flesh, when she broke her hymen and she became no longer a virgin. That's what it is. So again, it explains Deuteronomy 24, verse 1 through 4, explains the ground in which a man can execute a divorce. But even in this, a woman is unclean when her first husband divorces her. Now, this is where it becomes really, really dangerous and really heavy, is because while Deuteronomy explains the grounds on which a divorce is applicable, it's really no getting out of that. Once virginity is removed, it's pretty much done, And I mean, you see that in Deuteronomy 24, verse 1 and 4. In the fact that even after the first husband divorced her, she's still unclean, right? So now the kicker here is if the male that had, or if the female, if the male that had, or if the male that a female had her virginity removed by has not given a divorce, and in the scripture it says a written divorce that fit the guidelines to the verse, Deuteronomy 24, verse 1 through 4, then the female is still that man's wife. And all men that she sleep with after him or has sex with after him commits adultery with her. And so in that regard, if again, I'm gonna make it personal. If the if I slept with a young lady and I took her virginity, right? But I didn't marry her. And, I was a kid and we went our separate ways or whatever the case may be. Any man that sleeps with that woman, or that girl after me is an adulteress. Because technically, according to Genesis 2:24 and 25, that woman is my wife. Because I have her virginity. So it's one of those things where, going back in my mind, and, again, I'm not going to put all my business out in the street, but, I can't think of anybody that I have or haven't slept with, where this is not a problem. And I know it's not just me, because I know plenty of folk. I know folk that have been married for 40 years, but I know because of how the people talk about how they were before they met the person in which they've been married for 40 years to, that ain't that person that she married to, or that person he married to wasn't his first. And in fact, in some cases, they got kids before they got married. And they had relationships before they had kids. So it's a situation where, you got married people that are suffering. And, when you start looking at the statistics and you start looking at, the 50, one and two marriages in America end up in divorce, it becomes clear to see why Exodus 20 and verse 14 says, "Thou shalt not commit adultery," and why it's set apart with "Thou shalt not kill," "Thou shalt not murder." The big three. Those are the big three in the Bible. By some people's accounts. Those are the big three sins, if you want to call them sins. So, this was what was, like I said, I was fresh out the oven, and, he put that thing on me tonight, man. And, it was one of those things, it was really eye-opening, and it was really heavy, if I'm keeping it real, because, this really has affected my life. And I think it affects a lot of people's lives, and if you being real about it, and you looking at, how many people you've been with and how many people your spouse has been with, that shit starts to add up. It does, and then when you start adding all the, if you, for example, had, if you had three people and the three people you had three people, then you start getting into the multiples, the multiple. And that's why it's like when the scripture says you're cursed with the curse with the curse, and those curses compound on themselves. It's because, yeah, your three people is your three people, but the three people you had probably had however many people. And that's just you. You're not even talking about the other person that you're in a relationship with. You're not even talking about your husband or your wife. You're just talking about yourself and how many people this other person or these other persons have been with. And you start to see the multiples. And you start to understand why Exodus verse 20 or chapter 20 and verse 14 is so important, and why things are so screwed up, man. And I mean, just at this point, like I said, I'm fresh out of the oven. I really don't have an option. I don't have a solution to this. The only thing that I can do, and I said this because this is the second time I did this video. The first time I did it live, and it was kind of busted. But the first time I said the only thing I can think of for me, is we're really not held accountable for that which we don't know. All right. So a lot of this stuff for me was just revealed today and tonight prior to doing this video. Now, is that gonna escape me or take me from being judged and measured on what the scripture says? I don't know. I only know that when I stand before the Most High and have to give accounts of my life, and have to give an account to the lives of the people that I was responsible for. And in that regard, those are the women, the wives that I've taken upon myself to call my wives. So that's pretty much it for now, brothers and sisters. I'm your brother Tesjuan. May peace be upon you. And I hope y'all got something out of this message. Again, thoughtfully comment, and please share the video, because we're doing big things over here. We're trying to present truth and honesty, for people that can think outside of the box and not afraid to step outside of themselves and what they think they know, and do it that way. And it's like Aristotle say, the wisest man knows he knows nothing. So with that, peace.